All right, hello everyone. I'm Anders. I'm the host of Survivor Maryland. This week we got something different today. This is not the regular live show. That will be happening tomorrow. Ooh, we have some nice echo going on. I'm just going to mute Delram and Tim because it's one of them. Today I have the wonderful final five. I now have all five of them. Just from the finale, we have Dane, Delaram, Doug, Santi, and Tim joining us to talk about something that happened 4 years ago. If the mental scars have healed, what's going on? It's going to be a fun time, and I'm sure you're all really excited and have lots to say. If you have any questions during the stream, feel free to put them in the comments, and I will maybe ask the questions if they're not really mean. But before we get into that, it's been 4 years. Let's find out a little about these people. Dane, it's been 4 years. What's going on with you? You still in college?
No, I graduated somehow, Anders. So since Survivor, I studied abroad multiple times, traveled all over the world, and then went into working engineering consulting. I've been trying to figure out and get my stuff together as an adult. Not sure how well I'm doing it exactly, but just out here trying to be a young professional, I guess.
Engineer consulting. It's the greatest mix of business and engineering. Delaram, it's been 4 years. What about you?
Hello, everyone. I managed to graduate college. It took 5 years to do it, but I did it. I finished up in civil engineering. I've just been kind of chilling at home lately. I've been interviewing with companies. I might be moving to California, like Anders and Santi. So we'll see. Be a California girl.
All right, Tim, what about you? It's been 4 years. Where are you now? What's going on? You've grown out your beard.
For mid-quarantine, it was honestly terrible. It looked bad. But graduated school, went to Europe for a week, found myself, and then
Wait, you said went to Europe for a week, right? Okay.
Doug was there. And then I moved to Arlington, working for an HVAC company in DC, and living my best life.
Fantastic. We love it. You moved from Pennsylvania to Virginia. Not that far, but super far. It's just such a different life. You live in the city now.
I just changed so much in my trip.
You're no longer a small town girl. Doug, it's been 4 years. What about you? Have you graduated? What's going on?
Yeah, same deal. I helped Tim find himself after graduating. And then now, I'm in medical school. It's my second year now in Blacksburg, Virginia at VCOM is the school. And that's what I'm doing now.
Here's a question. While going around at that school, have you found any idols? How many have you found? What's the situation there?
I've been looking. Only got yelled at by 2 janitors this time, which is an all-time low.
We love it. Santi, it's been 4 years. Where are you at now?
So I'm out in California now. I'm in grad school, actually in the middle of final season right now. I got one tomorrow, but could not miss this. So excited for tonight. But my life honestly hasn't changed that much. Still in school and still losing sleep over Survivor.
This is a funny comment, Dr. Doug.
Pediatrician, Dr.
Doug. Santi, you mentioned right before we went live that you were like, I have to study for this exam. So I'm like, I'm just going to study up until the live show because this school's so important. And then what happened exactly? What happened instead?
Yeah, I had this whole plan. I'm like, all right, I don't have that much time to study. My exam's tomorrow morning, and I'm going to just, maybe catch the end, final tribal, whatever, and then just go on this live show. And then I turn on just the YouTube stream for a second. I'm like, crap, I'm already in this. And I just ended up watching the whole thing, and I'm so screwed for tomorrow, but it was worth it. It's been so interesting reliving this from 4 years ago. At first it was like, I'm so detached from the emotions of it. And then as it kind of went on, I was like, it's kind of like reliving it to some extent.
I'm glad something that happened 4 years ago can still cause you issues with school. That's what we aim for with Survivor Maryland. We have an important question from the audience, which I'll, of course, answer. Is Doug single? No, obviously not. You did not watch the finale. Him and Santi are together. They chose friendship. And then here's the friend who's asking. But let's talk a little bit about the finale. So you were all there in real life. You experienced it. The heartbreak, the trauma, the final tribal that was just truly an onslaught of like, fuck you guys for doing this. But also, good job, Doug. Thank you. So before we get into Final Tribal and those emotional scars that you have, let's talk about Final 5 and Final 4. Dane, Final 5 was quite an experience for you. What was it like rewatching it, and what do you feel like was left out of that moment?
So funny thing, Anders, I actually got off of work 15 minutes ago and I haven't watched it yet.
So you don't know. Well, tell me, what do you think happened in Final 5? And then we'll see if any of that is wrong.
I imagine there were about 30,000 swear words directed straight at Tim throughout the entire episode. I think my entire confessional is me cussing him out, probably.
Mostly the audience does it for you, but yes.
A
lot of that. And there was a lot of the at the tribal going, Tim is submissive, Tim is weak.
I called him a lot of different things. And in fact, Tim was even laughing about it, I remember at the time, saying like, oh yeah, I'm just submissive, I'm just a loser, aren't I, Dane? And I'm like, yep, you definitely are.
So let's talk a little about that. So Dane, in the episode, you didn't watch it, but what happens, Doug talks to you and he's like, I don't want to commit to this plan. I don't really feel like I should commit, but if I do, I'll play the idol on you and you'll be safe. Something that Doug says during the tribal, which is so funny and unnecessary to say, he goes, if I had 3 idols, I would save you, Dane. He says as he walks with 3 idols. Did you feel like there was a real chance Doug would have saved you? Or did you think you were dead in the water and you might as well just go out with a bang?
It was really hard to say because I could never fully give up at the time. Like playing Survivor, I never wanted to believe that I could actually lose. And even though I knew like all of the odds were against me, I was kind of used to that throughout the entire season. I'm not going to lie. I knew what it was like to be on the edge of elimination basically the entire time. But yeah, I believed in my heart of hearts that there was some way that I could get out of it. Unfortunately, it didn't end up materializing.
Fun fact about your game, Dane. Out of everyone who you were on a out of everyone who you played the game with, the only person to not vote for you has been Amanda. Every other person you've been on a tribe with has voted for you. Yeah. Teresa, except for Natalia, also. Teresa, Chris, Eric didn't vote for you. He never got the chance.
Yeah.
But everyone at Merge at one point did. It's quite a moment, truly, for you. Angie did at one point. Morgan did. Jasmine did.
Yeah.
You received a lot of votes from a lot of people. It's
I even remember that one episode where the trivia question was like, who has the most votes? And I was like, oh, that's so easy. It's me.
And you ended the season with 18, which, while not a record, still a lot of votes considering the fact that you really weren't like a kingpin player. You said it yourself. You didn't have like that much power, and none of your allies had idols or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you really were the cockroach? Why were you such a firebrand? Why did everyone want to get rid of you every single week?
That's a good question. I think I made myself useful to people at the right time very conveniently throughout a lot of the game. I'm not going to lie. Like when I look back on all of it, I realized that like, I wasn't the biggest threat in the world, but people knew that I was kind of making myself useful to people who were very threatening. And I think a lot of people didn't respect my ability in the game, and I imagine that made them very frustrated with me. Not to mention, I wasn't exactly the most likable person throughout most of the game. Like, you said going into the game, like, Dane, this is your one chance to, like, not be a likable person. Do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, I want to do this for the first time in my life. So I didn't exactly make friends with everyone. And, I kind of underplayed this idea of, like, I don't know. I think the way I played just really made people angry because I wasn't that powerful, and yet I was still kind of able to make myself useful to other people.
You were very confident.
At the end.
Speaking of people who were your biggest fan and always gave you a helping hand with a vote, Delaram, you and Dane were fraternity brothers, which ironically did not at all factor into your relationship. I think the only time you actually worked together really in the merge was because Angie was like, well, if you don't do it, we're not going to go for Doug. And both of you were like, all right, well, I guess. Why? You guys you guys had a prior relationship, and yet it was like on site. We're voting for each other.
Yeah, watching this 4 years later, I'm like, wow, this makes no sense. I'm like, dang, we're besties, like bros for life. And I'm like, but screw you. I'm voting. I really don't get it. I don't know what to say. Like, it's so cringe. I'm so sorry, Dane. I did you really dirty.
No, I mean, it goes both ways. I didn't really reach out to you either, if I'm being honest. Like in the very first episodes, we kind of just like went along with the boat and knocked out people like T and Natalia. But like, yeah, I mean, I remember for myself, I was like, I'm not here to make friends. Like, I'm not here to like be allies with my best friends. That's too predictable. And I think I might have wrote that a little too much.
True, yeah.
Yeah, Dane, you had some prior relationships, and you said, I'm actually going to betray them for fun.
Yes.
Thank you, Eric, and bye-bye, Delaram.
Oh, I know how much the audience loved that one.
Oh, they loved it, Dane. Here's the question. Do you regret getting rid of T? Or Natalia? Do you feel like you feel pride in doing those moves, getting rid of our queens?
Not particularly. I mean, I don't feel like great about it, of course, but when I look back on it, I don't think Teresa liked me very much. She said the only thing she liked about me was my name. So I'm not sure if that was a salvageable relationship. And then, I mean, I don't know. I can't tell you what it could have been with Natalia later in the game.
So much. You really took her out, Doug.
I know. I knocked out the future number one episode. All my fault.
All right, this is an important question. Who do you main in Smash? I'm sure around this time it's different, but
Captain Falcon. I mean, Captain Falcon.
Classic.
Jigglypuff for a very long time named Captain Falcon.
Jilly.
This is a question for you, Dane. If Doug had gone home and you made it to Final Tribal, how do you think you would have done?
That's a really good question. I think there's a chance I could have won. And I know that there's about half of the jury that wouldn't have voted for me. Like, I can tell you right now that Morgan wouldn't have voted for me, Sadie wouldn't have voted for me, and Abby certainly wouldn't have voted for me.
Delaram, would you have?
And depending on who else was there, like, even though I voted against him the whole time, brothers for life, so perhaps.
Yeah. I think it depends on whether or not people respected the idea of me playing it, quote unquote, under the radar. I mean, I got all the votes, so maybe I wasn't doing that great of a job of being under the radar. But I made myself not a threat until the very end where we were trying to take Doug out, and then Rox just didn't go that way. So.
Oh, Rox. We can talk a little bit about that. I know we've really talked about it before, but I really want to go back to it. Let's actually do that right now. So Rox is an episode that, in the moment for me, I didn't know what was happening. I was shaking when I saw the Doug votes. I was like, oh my God, it's happening. Tim, let's start with you on this question. For the entire game, you're like, I like Doug, but I'm going to have to cut him, and I want to get rid of Santi at some point. You get this opportunity. You don't do it. And then literally right after this vote, you're like, I don't trust Doug. I've got to get rid of him. What? What are you saying? You had Doug at a tie. All you had to do was flip, and you don't do it, and then it's time to go for Doug? Explain yourself, Tim.
That's kind of a hard thing to do, to explain myself for these decisions, because they didn't really make a ton of sense at the moment. I think they were founded on arrogance. I will say, with that vote, I had just been working with Dane and Angie, and we've been talking about a decent amount about getting Santi out. And then all of a sudden it flips on its end. And then I'm sitting there thinking, okay, there's 6 people left. I'm immune. Like, if I go to Brock's or whatever, I'm not stressed about it at all, which maybe gave me a sense of false confidence in terms of the next step. But I was thinking, okay, I know I can get to Final 3 with Doug and Santi. And I don't know if Doug goes home here. I don't know where the idols are. I don't know how the rest of it's going to fall. And I don't see a reason for Dane, Delaram, or Angie to work with me moving forward. Because they just didn't work with me on this biggest move of the game. And I was also thinking at the end, which is kind of ironic for how it all ended up. I was like, okay, this is the move of the game. And I don't know how I feel having 0 role in it, in terms of planning it, in terms of defending myself at the end.
That's fair, I suppose. I mean, it's just ironic because this entire episode you talk about, like, this is the time to get out Doug. I'm going to move against Doug. I don't trust him. It's like, bro, what about this vote we just had where he couldn't have played an idol. What do you mean now? I guess looking back, would you still have made this decision? If you see what happens, would you still be like, yes, I've got to do this?
Are you talking about I see throughout like the whole thing? Like,
let's say you're 4 years down the line and you're reflecting on this moment that you made, everything
and
that
there's
you
some footage
said.
to review.
Yeah. Do you think you'd still make the same move today?
I think I wouldn't, for the sole reason that I would want to see my game without Doug. But I think in terms of strategy, I mean, Angie said it herself in the live show. She was saying how she really wanted to, she'd rather have gone with Dane and Delaram. I didn't realize how much you guys really didn't work with each other, which kind of speaks to my social awareness at a certain point. Like, I figured, like, oh, it just makes sense for Dane and Delaram to team up with Angie and pick off me, Doug, and Santi. And apparently that wasn't the case, and I definitely could have gotten to the end with you, Dane, or you three, or Angie, and I don't know, some sort of mix. So that part's definitely on me. But also at the same time, Santi had an idol that she would have played Final 5.
Santi, why didn't you play your idol at Final 6?
I think overconfidence. I mean, at that point, I think my assessment was mainly Delaram. I was like, it's going to come down to whether or not Delaram is going to stick with us. And up to that point, Delaram had just been so easy to predict about what she was going to do at Tribal. And so I was like, there's no way that Delaram's going to do anything that what she said she was going to do. And I just felt like everything had kind of gone the way I expected the votes to go up to that point. So I was just like, I didn't really feel in danger. But in retrospect, it was very arrogant. Even though my name wasn't the one written down, you know, as Doug was saying, had I played the idol, he also would have done it at that same time.
This is a very funny comment. I'm sorry about this. Of all the players I've seen on Survivor, Tim is definitely one of them.
Do I have a second to respond?
Sure.
There's nothing to respond. It's on par with the saltine and tap water comment, which I have taken to heart.
So Doug, let's also talk about the Final 6 for you. Santi doesn't play his idol, so you don't play your idol. Why didn't you just let yourself get voted off, is my question.
That was a terrible question.
So my question is actually, looking back on that moment, do you think, I think I froze. Do you think you made, you were a little too in your feels in that moment about like everything? Because you went real hard on the cell, like, somebody, you won't turn on me. I've got an idol, I'm going to Final 4, like you were mad. Do you feel like that was, how do you feel about that moment?
I think that was honestly the first time in the game I saw a vote I didn't know was coming. So I think that there was definitely some arrogance involved in there, and just like what just happened, realizing I could go home as like the dumbest player in Survivor ever history, walking out with 3 idols. So I think there was a lot of emotions mixed in there. That were just coming from all ends, and it was very do or die right then and there, because I could have just lost with 3 idols in my pocket, basically.
Would have been the worst blunder in Survivor Maryland history, in Survivor history. This is an important question, which we will get more into later, but Doug and Santi, are you two still friends? Did the text from Sadie ruin it all? Did Santi beating you, Doug, ruin the relationship? You said yourself, if I take Santi to the end and he beats me, that'd be ugly. So what's the relationship now?
It is as great as it can be for him living in California, me living in. I actually lived with him for 2 weeks over quarantine. We're very close still. We talk a lot on the phone. It's as good as it could have been as it could be, I think.
Doug's kind of been adopted into my family, where I was talking to my little brothers about going home for Christmas, and they were like, "Oh, make sure to bring Doug with you." So Doug is definitely in. My mom loves him. So yeah, as far as the friendship goes, it's going great.
Tim, what about you? What's your relationship with Doug and Santi?
Oh, just terrible. No, it's been good, and it's been fun to watch it. Because I mean, from the beginning of Survivor, we've been kind of talking about it in different levels, but we were still tight. Sorry, everyone. I'm sure there want to be some consequences for our actions here, but I think all their consequences happened. We got yelled at for 2 hours straight. Now yelled at online for 15 episodes. Yeah, I know. Maybe I got DM'd.
Oh, what did you get DM'd?
Oh, not this episode, but the Rocks episode. Someone like found me on Instagram, DM'd me how much I ruined the season.
Which is so funny because it's like, there were two people involved who made sure that Doug stayed. It wasn't just you.
And I had a 0% chance of going home that week.
Well, that is on you. Santi playing with his game is fine, but you having no stakes and still choosing that is a moment. Aaron has an important question for Dane. Were you wearing that sweatshirt in this episode?
What sweatshirt? This
The
one?
one you're wearing right now.
No, I didn't get this till after Survivor.
Spoilers.
I'm
All right.
old.
So we have the final five moment where Tim, can you explain that plan a little bit and sort of what happened? Because I think it's a little bit rushed and a little bit hard to follow because it's stupid. But can you explain that plan?
So, I mean, this is the whole thing flipping, and then, I don't know, I wasn't, at that point, I was like, ignore my logic or my, motivation. But at that point, I was like, okay, let's just figure out how to get Doug out. And I was trying to figure out how to make Doug not play an idol on himself again. Because he had mentioned it. I think he talked about meeting up with Dane, or about, he might, play it on Dane if we want to get Delaram out or whatever. And I was like, okay, well, if he does that, I'll be like, oh, I'm definitely voting for Delaram or whatever, and then we'll be fine. But it was far-fetched. And this right afterwards, I was like, yeah, it was kind of stupid. And then it was obviously pointless and not worth it.
This brings him back to confessionals. I asked you to answer a question, and you didn't do it at all. So your plan, as I remember it, is Doug hopefully will not play his idol. If he does play it, he might play it on Dane, thinking no one's going to vote for him. So all votes on Dane will be canceled out. So if you and Delaram vote for Doug, that's 2 votes Doug. Theoretically, 1 vote Dane that's canceled out, and then Delaram. And then it's 2 votes Doug, and Doug goes home on a revote. Or you play your idol on Delaram after it's played on Dane, and Doug is just out. But then on your way there, I believe Doug said, I have 3 idols. Doug had a way of just sort of telling you randomly without a camera, I have an idol, by the way, 3 times. Doug, how come you would tell Santi every time you found an idol, except for the first one? But Tim, you kept leaving in the dark. And then follow-up question for that. Tim, why did you keep believing Doug? How many idols does he need to lie to you about? Perhaps I shouldn't trust him.
Yeah, I knew I had to keep. When I found the first one, I was like, no one's knowing about this one. But then once everyone started getting paranoid about them, I was like, okay, this is getting annoying. They shouldn't be. So that's when I had to start being like, all right, I have one. I always thought Tim had more of a chance to do something behind my back. So that's why I think I would leave him out more, just because I was scared he was going to pull in Amanda and Dane. I don't even know the situation, but I think I just was worried about him.
It's a smart move to not trust an ally because you're worried they might betray you, and then reveal that you didn't trust them and hope they don't betray you. It's a pretty cool move. Tim, but seriously, he lied to you multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
At what point was it like, enough is enough, I can't trust him?
So I also think this is to all the fans out there just watching this game, just dealing with Doug is a very genuine person about a very specific thing. Yes, he did lie to me about those things, but I also didn't think he was going to work behind my back to get me out. And then on top of that, I also had a really great way of talking myself into thinking that I could always be in a better position if I didn't vote Doug out. I was like, yeah, I could push for Doug right now, but then he's got all this other power and he's got this idol that he could use against me. So I would always take that next step and convince myself out of moves, but then tell people I was going to do the moves in a way that just made everyone else mad. Really good at that.
Did you have these thoughts while you were waking up to talk to Doug about what you should do?
Well, obviously I am pretty submissive. So step 1.
You make a joke, but
I disagree though.
Yeah, I also disagree about you being submissive at every point. Delaram, Abby first mentioned the idols, and then you became the Abby's voice for the rest of it, just talking about Doug literally has 2 idols, and people still were like, but does he? What was, especially at this point where Doug is just like saying this shit, did you feel vindicated when like Doug whipped out an idol and was like, I've got an idol, I've got 2 idols, me, Santi, and Tim are going, like, what was the feeling in that moment?
I was just like, duh, like, that's right. Like, yes, Doug, that's absolutely right. I was just upset that no one else was like, no one cared. They were like, okay, cool. I'm like, hello, like, this is a huge deal. Like, this literally screams, like, like, I'm powerful. So, I don't know. I just kind of felt stupid. And, like, no one was, I was like, hello. I could say that for 30 more minutes.
I mean, a lot of your game really was just shouting at people for 30 minutes and them going, I don't see this as significant or important. You did it so many times. What's funny about Delaram shouting is that on camera and in the edited show, it seems a lot more coherent and straightforward. In person, it's just, I mean, an amalgamation of words, truly. Like, if anyone can ascertain what she's trying to say, it's not me. Like, when she pulls out a list of Final Four, it's like, I got a list of things to talk about. I swear, you said the same point at least 5 times, and it was like, you're idiots. So, and the same with your final tribal council speech. You're like, I'm here to roast you guys. It's like, this is just a mess. Like, you can't finish a thought. You said, I lost my train of thought at least a dozen times. Oh, you muted yourself. Oh, you muted yourself. You need to unmute yourself, though.
Oopsies. It's ironic you said all that because I literally lost my train of thought as I unmuted myself. No, but I mean, it's funny because, you know, I'm out here telling people how I feel, and people are like, I can't hear you, so maybe I do have to repeat it 17 million times. And oh my God. Sorry, this laptop I'm borrowing just had a bunch of messages. You know,
you're doing it now.
I swear, like, I thought this was about to shut down. If it does, I'll join on my phone. But what I'm trying, maybe, you know, you gotta say it 30 different times. Guys, stop laughing. Yes, and when I do get upset, I get fucking. Oh my God, Andrew's just losing it. Oh my God, maybe I should shut up. No, but when I do get very upset and like into something, my brain, I'm sure we all hear this, my brain's like whoop, and I definitely felt that the last few triples. So, wow, I did not help my case at all. 4 years later, I'm still like this.
So Dane, you get voted out, and you are incredibly proud of the game you played. We go to Final Four, and you know, obviously it's the last challenge for Final 3. Doug is like, I need to win this or I'm going home. Tim says, Doug, you need to win this or you're going home. Delaram's like, I hope that Doug doesn't win this so he can go home. Santi doesn't need to say anything. We get to the challenge. Tim, you pull it out, and you and Doug have this really awkward talk where it's like, yeah, but you know, you should go home. And Doug's like, I guess, like, it makes sense. And then it's probably the most, I mean, these two, I'm so glad you filmed these conversations. It's like watching it as a third party. I'm like, oh my God. Cause it's so dramatic, Doug. I hope, I don't mean to come across as like insensitive. It's very dramatic. Like, you and Santi are talking about being voted out of a game, and you're like, I just don't know if it'll affect our friendship. Like, I don't know. And Santi's like, if this will hurt our friendship for more than a day, I can't do it. Doug's like, you know how much it means. I know in the moment it's very emotional. I do want to ask this, Doug, if they had voted you out, how much time would it have taken you to recover from that? And would it really have been like this major step back that you're talking about? Like, in the moment, of course you feel that way. 4 years later, how do you feel about it?
Right. Looking back, it's like, okay, it shouldn't have affected anything. But in the moment, I remember feeling like just saying like how I felt, honestly. And that's just how like it was. I think I don't even know. Honestly, like listening back already is just like making me feel weird about it. But I would say, I don't know, honestly, because like we live together. Like I saw Tim all the time too. So it's like, being like, our relationship definitely changed for like a good week. And it was like, is this gonna just be how it is? Like, I don't know. It's super weird because we're very close. Like, we're very close friends outside of it. So I know, like, from the camera point of view, it's like, oh, you talk a few times, whatever. It's like, no, we literally like share a room. Like, we talk 24/7 all day, every day. And that makes a big difference as opposed to someone that you have just met playing the game and you only talk about the game.
Understandable. Santi, from your point of view, how did you feel about this moment in actuality? Like, did you feel that Doug's response, obviously, it's a valid response to have, but how did you feel about him having this response? And did you feel like it was manipulation? I mean, we've talked about this a million times, me and Doug, me and you, me and Tim, about like, obviously Doug's intention here is not to manipulate you. Doug didn't want to, force you guys to do this because, oh, I want to win this game, and the only way I can, like, Doug clearly isn't doing this as a game move. It's like Doug cannot help that he is emotional about this process. How were you actually reacting in that moment? And 4 years later, did you feel like you made the right decision?
Yeah, I mean, it was like, I think the most concerning part to me was that I had seen Doug manipulate throughout the game, and it came out. Like, when you're spending that much time together with somebody, you really can start getting a sense of like, oh, there's something shady here. But when I walked in to the room, I don't know if it was that exact conversation that I got on camera, but there was this point where I saw Doug and he was just like not himself at all. And it was, I've known Doug since, we've known about each other since freshman year of high school. I say became friends in senior year, and it was just like something I had never seen. And so I think in the moment I was like wrestling between, what the heck, Doug, like you've been playing this game, backstabbing people left and right. Like, what is that? Where is this coming from? But then, it's also just as a friend, it was hard to see that. And I was trying my best to understand what Doug might be feeling in that moment. And I think that's kind of what you the camera captures, is like me really wanting to relate and be there for him, because that's just like, I guess, my instinct. So that's kind of what it felt like live. But I guess, looking back on it 4 years later, the biggest thing that I would change is just setting boundaries off the bat. I think that's the biggest thing that I just wish, like, I remember there's this episode I think it was like right after.
I think you told me it was like right when Doug gets his first idol, brings it to your room and like says to hide it, and like, if you vote me out, like, I'm gonna be mad.
Yeah, and there was like this, like, I've known Doug, and there was like this seriousness about it, where it was like this veiled threat. And in that moment, I should have said something, because I think that was the first time where it was like this blurring lines of like, hey, like, we're just playing a game, haha. And then, wait, is this going to have effects outside of the game too? So I think the biggest thing is, right, like, that would have been the moment to do it. But as the game kind of goes on, those lines just started really feeling, it honestly felt dark. Like, I think that episode kind of captured it. It was like a really dark, ugly feeling during that last week. And I think in my mind, it was just like, this is a matter of doing what's right and what's wrong. And that's where I was in that headspace at that time. And that's kind of what drove my decision, I would say, 4 years ago. So I would do things a lot differently if I were to go back. But I can respect myself for really doing what I thought was right at that moment and not caring what other people were going to do, because that kind of goes against my nature, being influenced by others.
I will say, watching the conversation between you and Doug, the way you handle it is very good and very mature. Like, the way that you respond to Doug's emotions, not invalidating it. Like, it's a very good, I think, example of how to interact with someone who's clearly emotionally distressed, but not sort of give away your agency in that moment. I will also say it's, oh God, I feel like Delaram, I'm losing my train of thought. But I think you do talk a little bit about the blurring of lines and like how hard it is emotionally, and like not really having a choice in that matter. And I think you bring up a point there where you can't be faulted for making this decision, because it wasn't exactly game at that point. And I think there's a good question here from Naomi, who does an incredible podcast about it, Live Reality Games. If you haven't listened to that, you should. They're very positive about all of you, especially you, Tim, I'm pretty sure. But yeah. So, Doug, where did these deep feelings come from? Obviously, you, Tim, and Santi are all very close, but the feelings of sort of betrayal and it hurting the friendship, where did they come from?
Yeah, I think like Santi said, the lines were kind of blurred between, it started becoming like intertwined with life. It's like you trust someone, like obviously in life we all have things going on and there's all these big like other things that you trust. You put your trust into people in that. And then you'll talk about game for 10 minutes, then you come back. And then this also just becomes kind of like your life. Like it's like you hang out with these people, you see them all the time. And then at the same time, it's like, wow, I worked so hard to be so dominant all season that I had such a passion to win this game because I put so much effort in to everything, to all my relationships with everyone, to finding idols, to just any aspect of the game. I put I full sent it basically. So it like kind of was just a part of my life. And I felt like, I think part of it was just knowing that it was all coming to an end was another just, I guess, different thing that I just didn't really know how to adjust to
that. Tim, I want to get to you about this point, but this is a question that's been coming up. Do I consider Doug's blunder at Final Six the worst move? I consider it Doug's worst move of the season 100%. I think that move and his absolute blundering of that moment is, I would look at it and be like, how can you be a mastermind? And then that happens. But I also think the worst move of the season, in my opinion, is Doug continuing to text Sadie. Because we've seen throughout the season, and I made a point to include these moments, Sadie cannot help but text people the worst thing. She did it with Mike by telling him that you don't trust him. She did it with Josh by sending not only like 5 texts that she wanted to get him out, and then screenshots of your conversation with her. It's like, her doing exactly what she is prone to doing, which is sending texts recklessly. It's like, to me, that is a moment where it goes, Doug can be, even if you want to look past the Final Four vote, you cannot look past the fact that Doug felt so hurt in this moment, he had to act emotional with his friends, but still have an outburst with someone else complaining about it. And like, I remember that night very clearly. We were done with Final Four Tribal, and I was like, annoyed, obviously, because Tim and Santi had really been blue-balling me, being like, we're going to go for Doug. Like, it's finally time. And then being like, actually, we are reversing that decision entirely. Doug talked us down. I'm like, fine, it's based on friendship. And then I get texts from, I think, Tim and Santi at the same time, being like, hey, Sadie just sent us this. And then I had to talk to Sadie and Doug, being like, what the fuck? Why did you send them this? Why were you talking? And it became this whole thing. It's like, do I have to kick Sadie out? Do I have to remove Doug from the finals? Because I don't know how explicit I can be with the rules about it, but like, talking is obviously whatever. So we'll get to that moment, obviously, Doug. And I don't mean to shame you for that. It's been 4 years. We know what happened, but I think it does need to be talked about. Tim, you and Doug didn't live together, so you didn't have to see each other every day. You were obviously close, you, Santi, and Doug. Can you explain a little bit about the relationship and how, from your perspective, it was, and how you felt? Because you talked about, I would never feel this way if I were the one who would be cut.
I think it was, I talked about being arrogant earlier. This was more ignorant in that, like, I always felt like I could justify every single one of my moves with gameplay, and because of that, who cares about what people's feelings are? Like, obviously I still cared, but it wasn't the forefront of my mind until it was like explicit. This is something that's going to affect out of game significantly. And in terms of the relationship with Doug and Santi, it's been solid for forever. But definitely throughout this game, it was like, I'd work with Doug, and then it would be like, oh yeah, and Santi's on board too. And that was my relationship with Doug. And then I'm sure Santi was working with Doug, being like, oh yeah, and then Tim will be on board too. Sorry, I lost my train of thought again.
I just want to. So you and Doug obviously have a different relationship. In the moment when Doug is sort of coming to you with tears in his eyes about, like, he says, I don't care, just tell me what you're going to do. Although clearly I do want to stay in the game. Like, from your perspective, what are you feeling? How are you reacting to Doug?
So I think right before I like lied to Doug's face and like about trying to get him out with the Dane vote, whether or not it made sense or not, I still lied to him, and he was talking to me about how he trusted me so much, and like I was just using it to get him out. So I was still pretty raw from that, which was like 2 days earlier.
And then right after that, there was this whole situation. So just sitting there, it felt like looking back, I kind of knew that there was a right thing to do and a wrong thing to do. And generally, with most moral dilemmas, if Santi's on one side, that's generally the right thing to do. So I think definitely having Santi having a similar opinion that I did, where it was like it made it a lot easier to make the move because Santi was there also making the same move. So yeah, it felt terrible. I felt like I was throwing away my game, but at the same time, I knew it was like a no-brainer, and I know looking back on it, it was just kind of like it was gonna be something I would be mad at myself if I made the opposite decision. Regardless if Doug was even like in the 0.01% chance that he was manipulating me, I was like, given the information that I know, the right decision is still saying F you to the game, unfortunately.
This is a good question because it segues into another point. Delaram, you can help answer this. It's about after someone is I unmuted you too quickly. It's about after someone is eliminated, how hard is it to separate that? How hard is it to like keep yourself from talking game? You and Abby are a specific scenario because she was voted out a couple votes for you, and you guys lived in a dorm room together. Doug and Sonny lived in like a quad, or I don't know what you'd call it, like an apartment sort of thing. So it was easier for you not to be directly with each other. But you and Abby lived in like a 4x4 box.
Yeah, I saw that comment. I really don't know what I did like 4 years ago, but I just think like it was, you know, I was really involved at that point. I did talk about it. Just kind of like, I mean, cause she would show up at some of the tribal councils. So sorry, I don't have an answer. 4 years ago, me does not remember the conversation.
Doug, I do want to hear your perspective. How hard was it for you and for Santi? You guys are on the same, as we heard, co-ed flag football team with Sadie. How hard was it to maintain a good social relationship without going into the game?
With Sadie in particular? Is that what you're talking
Were there
about?
other people you were texting, Doug?
It's very difficult because you are build these deep relationships. And I think a lot of the fans are like, why does everyone talk to him a lot? Why does everyone want to keep telling him things? It's because we're friends. We're actually really good friends that talk all the time about everything at this point. So it's like, that's what is so like intricate about this game, is that you meet these new people that you really like and you want to learn about their life. You care about their life. You have things to say. You want to ask them questions. So it's really hard when the game decision is to vote them out, but it's then you're like, I can't talk to my friend anymore. Like, it's just a really weird situation, honestly.
Santi, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like rewatching it, the word, I think I already mentioned this, but the word that kept coming back into my mind was just boundaries. Like, this game requires that if you're going to successfully play the game and be able to make like good moves, and still like maintain those friendships after the game, they have to be really strong. And it's similar with talking to the jury, right? Like, I personally didn't have as much of a hard time because it was also really busy end of the semester. I remember finals were coming up, and so between Survivor and like school and other stuff that I had going on, it was just like I didn't have time to just keep up with people just for the fun of it at that point. So I think I just didn't, and we didn't cross paths. So for that reason, it wasn't especially hard. But like Doug was saying, right, if you are spending time with people and talking to them about your life, and the game just naturally comes up. And unless you have those really firm boundaries in place about what's game, what's not, what are we going to talk about, what are we not going to talk about, then it's easy to slip up.
I also think like with all that, like you meet these people, like obviously unless you meet them beforehand, you meet these people through Survivor. You guys talk about Survivor like all the time. Like whether or not you might mention like something random or like the basketball team or something like that, like Survivor is what you do. And the second you vote someone off, like you lose that whole chunk of something to talk about. And it's really hard to maintain that and to like Santi just said, like put the boundary, like, okay, we actually can talk about this, even though this is what so much of our relationship is, like the beginning of it was based off of.
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting and probably would not be seen on camera, is that like Doug and I work close and we're friends, and like obviously we're like roommates, and so that wouldn't have happened if we weren't friends already. But like the game, at least for me, I think Doug has said this in the past, like took that friendship like to another level where like it was, you know, we spent so much time together.
More than friends, I gotcha.
Yeah, but it was just like, it was this, you know, what what was real, what wasn't. Those are the kind of questions that like you ask yourself when you play a game like this. Looking back on it, is oh, like if you feel betrayed, what about all these other things that you said were those lies too? And so you kind of have to like go back and reassess. So those are just kind of like the weird things, psychological things going on that you're not told when you sign up to play Survivor. I think they're like, now knowing them, I still love the game and have such a respect for it. Feel like I would approach them differently, but that's like for me the biggest surprise was like, this is really like there's some really difficult things to emotionally process when you're playing this game if you don't go about it the right way.
I think when we mentioned earlier this was a dark episode, I like to think of this as the reverse Terrapin Trials. In that season, it ends darkly because of a friendship just sort of burning and being awful. And I think this one is like the opposite of that, but still dark, of really fighting to make a friendship work in this game, despite it being harmful to your games, to balance between game and friendship. And that ties into the theme of major conflict. You thought it was about your majors. It's actually about the relationship between game and and bonds. So I guess my question, actually, we're not going to talk about that much. I do want to know, let's erase the Final Four moment and the texting moment. I really want to hear about your games and give you all a moment to like actually sell your games to me and really give me why you should have won and what your story was of major conflict. So I'm going to start with Dane because you never had the chance to do it at Tribal, and then I'll go to Delaram. Dane, what is your winning story? Why should you have won major conflict?
So, Andrew, you prefaced it with like eliminating the things that you had said, but I think that's actually the number one reason why I deserve to win the game. Because out of everyone in the game, I played the least emotionally, and I think with the most integrity. I said, I completely separated myself from all friendships in the game, and I said, I'm playing to win, and it doesn't matter who I step on, because it's never personal. Like, I remember in the game, you feel all kinds of things towards people. You can hate someone, you can really like someone, but at the end of the day, the end goal of any competition is to win. And you saw this in the episode where I ended up getting Sadie out because I stood on the pole for almost 2 hours. Like, I think that encapsulates the entire thing about my game is like, I don't care how long I have to stand here. I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to hang in here until I win. And if you don't want to stand with me, or if you get upset by that, then that's unfortunate for you. But I'm going to be standing at the top of the mountain at the end of the day. In terms of strategy, I know that I was never the strongest physical threat in challenges. And while I wasn't the biggest social threat, I was close with people who were the biggest social threats through pretty much most of the game. And I was able to dodge dying essentially because of that. So I think had I made it to the end of the game, people who respect integrity of competition would have understood the way that I played was honorable and that I did have a real strategy. Even if playing it slow is very unentertaining for the audience, it's a respectable strategy at the end of the day. And I think I had earned my W at the end.
Well, look, if the audience was voting based on who had the most exciting game, none of you would have gotten the vote except for Delaram, but only because of what happened at the end. I was pinning comments and I noticed one that said, "Man, these guys are really good at procrastinating." And someone commented, "Well, they are college students." Delaram, what is your story? Why should you have won major conflict?
I think I should have won major conflicts because socially I maintained a lot of good friendships. Going into the game, I knew Abby, I knew Dane. The comment made me lose my train of thought. No, I'm just kidding. And then during the game, I just made a lot of friends with all the players, most of the players actually. Outside of the game, but I think because of that and like that trust, that's how I got so far, is because I didn't know Sadie before the game, and then getting really close with her, I really trusted her. I was just kind of like doing whatever she told me to, and looking back on that, it does not look good. I'm just kind of kicking myself in the shin for it, but when the opportunity arose and I finally spoke with Angie, and we met up with Dane, I was like, okay, like Doug is clearly an excellent player. Let's make a move. Like it's been so slow. It's been so easy lately. So, I thought I just, I shot my shot. I did what I had to do. I'm pretty proud of it. I'm upset it got down to rocks, and like Angie, the one who proposed the idea of us, making this big move, was the one who had to go. Like that was bad. But yeah, I think I just kind of took advantage of the relationships I had, and once I didn't have them, I did what I had to do and try to make a big power move.
Delaram, it's very funny. You really played the game at Final 7 on, and then it was like, man, Delaram can win this. It was very funny how the jury was like, I might vote for Delaram when she gets there, and in my mind, I went based on 2 rounds of gameplay. All right, all right. They really wanted Doug's blood. They were like, I'm ready for Doug to go, and you did it. Not Dane though, never Dane. All right. Let's hear from Tim. Tim, you didn't really get a chance to talk about it, and every time you did talk about your game, you spoke in the most general statements. So I want to ask you specifically, why should you have one major conflict?
Oh, specifics? Oh god. So I think it's true. You can't really tell my game or my story without Doug, obviously, because a lot of my social. So everyone's like, oh, you're riding Doug's coattails. But from my perspective, it was like a lot of my social pull was because of Doug. Sorry, how am I supposed to keep my train of thought on that?
Sorry, continue.
I mean, day one from the beginning, I was able to develop the relationships that were kind of, I don't say behind the scenes, but were kind of necessary at points. So me and Amanda were really close. And we were able to, our relationship was in a way that when I lost Doug, so when we had the tribe swap, we got pulled in, and it really could have gone the other way. If Amanda flipped, it would have been me, Santi, Dave. It would have been 1, 2, 3, whichever way, unless we found an idol or kept winning the challenges, which they didn't have any motivation to try to win at that point. And that was a big 3 a lot. I mean, that jam was huge. Like, that's a huge alliance. And I was able to use my relationship with Amanda and my relationship with Santi to kind of take that and pivot from dangerous position into a position of advantage in the tribe. So then all of a sudden we get to merge. And I'm with Doug still, and Santi's on. So I feel good about that, and Amanda. But at the same time, Sadie's clearly out there, and Doug has this relationship with Sadie, and Delaram and Abby have been pulled into this through the roommates / like tribe swaps and all this, that, and the other. And it's not a good position for me to be in at that point. It's true that Amanda had to go home, but besides that, or I would say after that, I was able to use my relationship with Doug as well as my relationship with Dane and Angie to flip on Sadie and cut that off. And that was the other thing pulling Doug in my direction. I mean, Doug said it himself. The reason that, I mean, this could be just BS too, but it was also like the reason that he didn't give me the idols is because he thought that there was a chance that I could have flipped where Santi wouldn't have. And I thought that, and this is the frustrating part of me. I texted you this earlier. I was like, I feel like Dane is a cat in terms of he has 9 lives and just won't die. And I'm a kind of a weird cat in terms of I have 9 lives and just won't win. Because I had so many opportunities and relationships to where I could have made the move and didn't. And that's the frustrating part of my game. But I think it's also the reason why I was able to last so long. But it lasts so long in a good position as well. I was able to make the move with Amanda and Santi to take out Jam. I was able to make the move with everyone to take out Sadie. And then from there, I think my roommates logged in under my account on the other laptop. So.
Sure.
I mean, Tim Chubbuck sounds like a pretty trustworthy guy. Yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought again. Additionally to that, I mean, this is also just a part of the game. The challenges that were the most important, or the tribals that were the most important, ended up being 6, and I would say 4. So 6 and 4, which are the challenges that I ended up winning. Which means, I mean, you win as much as we like to downplay the challenges and say it's all about strategy. At one point, winning the challenges means you survive another week. And especially at 6, I mean, if I don't win that challenge, the game goes a completely different way. And I might not have lasted the final 3.
God, if only.
Yeah, sorry. I know everyone's mad.
No one's downplaying the challenges. Dane won one, and it put him on the map. It put him on the map. No, I mean, those are all. This is also a great comment of why you should have won. Because you're the comedian.
The second I saw that in quotes at the start of the season, I know it's gonna be in trouble.
Well, I mean, we all saw what happened. I think the high point of jokes for me, I don't know if anyone had anything different. Mine was definitely, it's funnier now than it was in 2016 when Doug goes, Santi, are you feeling the burn? And Tim goes, no, he's more of a Hillary guy. Really funny 4 years later. Not a couple days after the election.
No, it was a little too. That was a sad day. Like I just remember like walking around campus, like holy shit, like that. It's
Cloudy too. It was raining.
I know it was like apocalypse. It was like when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. It was like that's the only thing I could equate it to recently. Everyone was just like, holy shit, you're depressed.
Okay, so Doug, I want to hear why you should have won. And I'm removing those two moments in particular because I think they're just very hard things to legitimize why you should win despite them. So I would love to give you the moment to really give in a detailed way why you should have won this game.
I think start to finish, I played the best game, I would say. I think from the beginning, I had a lot of different relationships and alliances to always like put myself in a good position, and that didn't change throughout. If I wanted to change something, then it usually happened, and that's kind of how the game went. And I think that it showed when every time anyone would make a move against me, every single fan and every single player got so much hype because I was at that point the one to go after. So I think that says a lot about my game, because as soon as someone wasn't afraid to make that move is as soon as they got all the love. I think starting out just from when Eric started targeting me, I was able to wiggle out of that situation pretty early on. And then right after that, that's when it really turned. And I think I stayed on top for the rest throughout.
And of course, we've got your hashtag Doug Plug. If you don't get on the Doug Plug, you'll get right on. Dane Train is still my favorite joke of this season. It's so funny. Santi, I would like to give you the chance. We know you won the season. Which of course, like in the moment, I think we were all just like, what's that whole week was like a big, what the fuck is happening? Like, I don't know how to process this game. But I think 4 years later, the way I process it is like, there is a story here and a reason why you win. And it's not just Doug cries and breaks the rules of the game. So I want to give you a chance to explain why you should win deservedly over anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at so from start to finish as well, I started the game without any pre-existing relationships on my tribe, and there were a lot of them in Chickasha where people knew each other beforehand. But despite that, like I managed to become the most powerful person on that tribe and had a say in every decision. You get to the swap, and I know people like hate that these results happen. But when the Jasmine and then the Liam votes happened, we were basically eliminating two of the biggest threats to win the game just early. And if there's any critique on my game is that like I peaked too early and that there weren't like enough moves to be made at the end. Or like, why'd you go quiet? Well, one, I had to. Like, you hear it throughout the season. People were throwing out my name. They saw it. They saw the moves I were making. They respected my game, and that elevates your threat. And so I think it was wise and the right move to play it down. And then it's like gets to the point where it's like, all right, well, what moves are left to be made? And with all the respect to the players that were there towards the end, none of them besides Doug would have been considered an earth-shattering move besides Sadie, which I was willing to do, and it was the best thing for my game. And so, I think I made the right moves and had a lot of key alliances, switch them up at the right time. And even like I know people see the Doug and Tim relationship like cheat code. A lot of people didn't capitalize on their pre-existing relationships as well. And I think it's testament to how we were able to build them together towards the end. And I think the last thing, I did play what I consider to be a really honorable game, and that's part of why the reason I voted people out, but they didn't get mad at me for it. I think they respected the way I played, and that is in the end something that helps with the jury. And for Doug, he played a perfect Final Four finish game, which is, I think, in my mind, what would have been like the conclusion to like he had the mastermind. I think he had the edge. If we were being objective about strategy at the end. But I think he did like the mistake in my mind he would have made was that threat level management where at Final Four, that person just gets voted out naturally. So that's kind of like my read on it 4 years later. Yeah.
This is a good comment. Santi Blink challenge. But no. Someone also wants to. There's a lot of thirst here. I've seen thirst comments about everyone in this room. I'll say that at least. And my response is only one of them won most attractive. Remember that. I cut a lot of the asking this question over and over. So Doug won most likely to win. Is he a threat? But I do want to take a break from roasting Santi and Doug and Tim for what we all want to roast them for, just forever and ever. I want to instead turn to Dane and Delaram. Doug brought this up at Final Tribal, and it was something that I don't think I ever didn't talk about in professionals or at tribals. You saw from literally day one that Doug, Tim, and Santi all knew each other. Even if they didn't explicitly say it, Santi and Tim knew each other, and Doug and Santi lived together. Why was that never a real threat? Why was there never consideration we need to break this up until Final 7, really, and Final 6? Dane, I want to start with you.
Yeah.
Why?
So I'll tell you, I knew that Doug was a threat for since week 2, basically. I definitely knew in the back of my mind. The thing is, I knew that I didn't have the social power to flip. And this goes back to, first of all, the Eric vote out, which I know so many people were pissed about. But I would stand by the fact that I was aware enough to understand the power dynamic of the tribe and that it wouldn't have worked out if I had gone the other way. And so keeping that in mind, I knew because Doug was one of the most powerful players, it wasn't going to be right to piss him off until I really had the right moment to do it. And I felt that with Angie, where we went to the infamous Rocks episode, that was my biding my time to finally freaking do it, kind of thing. I'd been waiting in the shadows forever and finally had the power to do it. It didn't end up working out, as you saw, but
yes, it's weird how you wait until Final 6 to take on a trio. Weird how it didn't work.
Yeah, no, it's funny how it works that way. But yeah, I mean, I just knew that if I had messed it up at any point, I would have been dead. And so I'd thought to myself, when are you going to do this? And I'd been trying to calculate exactly when I could do it. And, if there was another time where I felt like it would have worked out perfectly, I think I could tell you. But honestly, I can't tell you right here when it would have worked.
Delaram, I want to ask you the same question, but I also want to make a point about this final tribal moment always pisses me off, where Sadie goes, Tim and Santi, you guys didn't take out Doug, and that's fucked up. You ruined this game. Meanwhile, I remember so clearly what Sadie's plan was going to be, and it was at Final 5 we'll cut off Santi, and then at Final 4 we'll cut off Doug, which is just as stupid of a plan. Because what do you mean? Why would that be your preferable move to do? Is wait until Final 4 to get rid of Doug? Get rid of him now. So Delaram, why didn't you make a move against Doug and Santi, who you wanted to make a move against anyways, who weren't in your endgame? Why did you let Sadie continue to do a strategy that she's very obviously against at the end of the day?
Totally. I completely agree. Watching that back now, I see that. I think in the moment, I just things were really working out for me at the time, and the relationship I had with Sadie, I'd say was very similar to Doug. I mean, I was definitely closer to Sadie, but on the surface, with Doug, we just had this thing where we got each other, and I really just rode on that. But also, I think if earlier I made a big move on Doug, everyone was so connected and committed to Doug. So if I did that, I think I would have easily been voted out. Oh, Delaram's trying to make a big move. She's scary. And so, yeah, I just kind of rode on that until too late. But yeah, I think I was just afraid of getting voted out earlier. And
Doug, it's been a joke all season about how people love to wake up and just immediately tell you information. I want to know, how hard was it for you to constantly be given all this information and then have to backstab almost every single person in the game at some point?
I was really, as you can see, it was not easy for me to handle that. It was difficult because I just remember sometimes after a tribal, I would sit down and I'd text every single person individually, oh my gosh, that was crazy, right? Or glad that went the way it was supposed to. Every morning I would text the same, oh, so what are you thinking? When are we meeting up? This is what, and I decided who I was going to share this information with, who I was going to hold back from. So it was definitely a sport in its own to try to just maintain talking to everyone to make individually, honestly. So it's But at the same time, we had such good friendships, which made it so hard to vote everyone out, which is why I couldn't write Sadie's name down. And I like couldn't write some other people's names. I like didn't want to vote some people out because we had just had such a good bond. And like I'm still friends with a lot of these people like 4 years later.
You couldn't do it. It's so funny, the Sadie moment. I don't think it became a plot point on the show, but it was very funny because like I remember asking like, why are you sad? And you're like, because we're gonna have to vote Abby. Like I'm really sad about getting rid of Abby on the Sadie vote because like it was so weird how you created this idea that like, yep, we're definitely going Abby. If they don't tell me we're going Sadie, I don't know. Meanwhile, you're crying in the back like it's Abby. I just want to know like why the charade on that? Like why did you have to pretend like it was going to be Abby?
Yeah, dude, I feel like it's the same answer I've said for 17 questions. I had such a good relationship with Sadie.
Oh my god, it's all about
I couldn't do it.
Always about relationship with Doug. This was a question that was asked earlier, but I can't pull it up because there's been a bajillion comments. Doug, after it ties, which we can talk a little bit about the tie. Obviously, season 8 applications for attorneys come out. How quick were you to be like, yes, I would love to go through this again? Like, there's nothing I'd love more than this emotional roller coaster.
Oh, it took a long time. I think you knew. I definitely had multiple conversations with you. I talked to everyone. It definitely took me a few weeks because that winter I studied abroad in Australia too. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe if I go leave the country for a few weeks, I'll come back and be okay. So I think that was part of it. And then it was not an easy decision, honestly. But again, the love for the game will win over every time.
Let's talk a little bit about Final Tribal Council. This was a hard Final Tribal to live through. Obviously, from my perspective, it was just a hard one to be like, I don't know what the fuck is happening. Tim, Santi, Doug, can you sort of describe your feelings coming into it and sort of your feelings during it and before you hear the results? Obviously, we can say after how you felt, but I think we know the answer. So we'll start with Tim. Going into Final Tribal, how are you feeling during it? We can tell you felt angry, but can you sort of describe it a little more? And then before the votes were read.
Yeah. So going into it, I was trying to remember if I thought I could win. And I think going into it, I still thought if I was a jury member, hearing what I've heard, unless Doug explicitly comes out and says, it was all fake, I just did this to make it to the final 3, then I'm like, okay, I'm voting for Tim or Santi. That was my perspective going into it. That's why, if I remember correctly. And then, I mean, that Final Tribal Council was 30-some degrees out. It started raining halfway through. And it was just straight up miserable and super long. And this is after getting texts from Sadie about how we're terrible. Text from Delaram, love you Delaram, about how we're terrible. And just like sitting
text
there.
Text from Dane about how you're submissive and terrible.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, Dane, I gotta be honest. I forgot about the text, and I was like, the second the word submissive was mentioned, I was like, oh, shit. Like, I remember now. It came rushing back. I just remember getting really angry and really like, the whole game's about like feeling personal. Like I felt personally attacked for stuff that I wouldn't have personally attacked other people for. So it was just a lot of anger, which is why I think I didn't do it. I'm also not good at explaining myself or explaining myself to myself.
We all know.
Yeah, I know. So with that combined with my anger was like, I spent the entire time just being pissed off that the jury was even considering Doug to win and why they were so mad at Santi and me. So with that, I didn't really fight for myself as much as I could have. It was a terrible experience. Looking back, when we first started, 15 weeks ago, watching The Survivor, I was like, the first time I saw it, I just couldn't sleep that night. I think I slept 3 hours because I just remembered this Final Tribal Council and just getting yelled at. Because as much as it is like, oh, I'm yelling at you because you didn't make a moving game, it's personal. Like, even if you say, oh, I love you outside the game, and this is a game thing, it still sucks to get told you're a coward and get told all this stuff. So I was not happy.
This is actually a really good question. In CBS Survivor, when there's a tie, it's only happened once, but the third juror also revotes. Of course, in that specific scenario, it was tied between the jurors, 5-5, so they had to break it another way. But let's say we did have you vote, Tim. Who would you have voted for?
Santi. I think it would have been hypocritical for me not to vote for Santi after my entire argument. But yeah, I mean, I think I should have won. I think I played a better game than Santi, but I would still vote for Santi.
If only there was someone there to explain it.
It shouldn't have been me.
Santi,
I just had Doug do it.
hey, you turned to Doug. Doug, can you, to be fair, when Doug explained why you two should win, very clear, very concise. Yes, I do. But when you were like, fuck you guys, Doug is shit.
I got yelled at for so long. You didn't show it. It was like an hour and a half of getting screamed at.
Yeah, how many times do I need to have you yelling about, it's personal. You can't yell at us about this. Like, we get it.
I need to
I get it. Every question to you is basically that. Santi, your feelings, obviously going into it during and before the votes.
I remember a confessional with you where we were just kind of talking through Final Tribal, and you said to me, just expect the worst and then, come prepared for that. And so I took that to heart. And so I kind of was like, I'm just going to go in expecting this to be unanimous, just for everybody to have a closed mind and just to rip me and Tim, which wasn't, at least from the questions asked and kind of how the attacks that happened, it was that for most of it, or at least it felt like it was going in that direction. But I think because I was prepared, it wasn't like this crazy surprise. And the way I approached it was like, you know what, I'm not just going to go there and, not have things to say for my game. So I just prepared what I thought like was going to be the best case for me, and just showed up, ready for like whatever answer or whatever questions were going to be thrown at me, and try to handle that the best I could. And so I, as far as like how it went, I was like, I had mixed feelings about it during. I thought I answered some of the questions really well, and I didn't know how much of an effect that would have. So I honestly thought it was going to be unanimous at the end, just because, from what Sadie said and even Dane's reaction, or well, Dane towards the end was like, consider us. But the beginning, the you tried stars, just all this kind of like these effects, and can't forget Delaram. But yeah, it just thought that it was going in that way. So I was genuinely really surprised when I saw any votes for me or Tim at all.
Doug, what about you? Your feelings going in and during and right before the votes?
Yeah, going in, I don't know. I had this sense of like guilt. I'd say that I was just like, oh gosh, I like don't. It wouldn't feel great if I would have just beaten my friends like this. But also, it was like I also think I deserve to win. So I definitely was like some kind of weird mixed emotion. I didn't really know how to handle, I would say. Yeah, I feel like I blacked a lot of it out. There was a point I remember looking at Tim and being like, I don't feel right. Like there was like in the middle of it, I was like, oh gosh, like this isn't good. And I blacked most of it out except for like the really memorable moments. I remember right before after the votes were cast, Tim looked at me and goes, I hope it's not 9-0 you. And then that's that happened too. So we really didn't know where the votes were gonna lie. Like we knew Sadie was voting for me. But other than that, I think no one knew who was voting for who. So we had no idea what was going to happen, even after it all played out.
Thank you for the ASMR about your little hood or your little collar. The mic is rubbing up against it. But
sorry.
No. I also want to ask Dane and Delaram. So obviously coming in, there was a lot of there's a lot of anger, which is completely fair. I mean, I recognize that. So everyone knew it was definitely a hard decision for everyone, and no one was going to be happy. But obviously, those not in the friendship were definitely like, "This is fucked up," because I know I could never be on the receiving end of it. And it's a disappointing way, especially when you've given me false hope otherwise. But I guess I want to know, Dane, you handled this very differently than Delaram. Dane, you came in and you're like, I don't respect Doug for this, and I don't want to vote for him for it. Was there a general sentiment within the jury of I don't want to reward Doug for this behavior? What was behind your speech, and why make it? What led you to do that?
I'll tell you exactly. So we are in the dorm before Final Tribal, and I'd gotten texts from people. We were talking amongst each other, and the mood was so bleak. Everyone is so downtrodden, and feeling like giving up, and they're like, oh, I think I'm just going to throw my vote to Doug because, life is unfair, but yeah, whatever, I'll throw my vote this way. And I got really pissed off about that, I remember. And I even had the You Tried stars, so clearly I was pissed off too, but I was like, no, F this, I'm not standing for these people sitting around and moping in Final Tribal. I kind of wanted to give everyone a kick in the pants, stop just leaning on this apathetic attitude, and let's actually look at the game for what happened, and let's acknowledge who played in what style and who presents what arguments to win. And so when I went in with it, like the whole integrity of the game thing too, like I'd already stated that, but it comes from like the background of competitive Smash for me. Like it's all about playing. Like you play to win and you play with the integrity to win. There's no cheating. Come on, man. Like that was so like my MO. And I felt like that was kind of the biggest, most important point to make. I see you laughing over there.
Sorry, the comparison to competitive Smash.
Dude, that was the culture I came from. But for real. Like
it's just funny. It's just funny.
It is funny.
Classic Captain Falcon main moment. Delaram, you had a very different perspective, and I do want to get your perspective. But it is ironic, and I think I think Santi and Tim say this several times. Like, there's so much anger towards them, but not towards the person who put them into this position. Why were you, Abby, and Sadie specifically like, we're pissed about this? We are going to vote for Doug, though. Like, because it's sort of like you cannot have your way both ways. It's like if you're mad about this move, you shouldn't reward the person who forced this decision you hate. And if you want it to be the best game, you shouldn't make your questions about how much you hate the move they made, because they. So I guess why? What was the mindset about these decisions? Why did you come into it with that perspective?
Totally. I was mad at all three of them, pretty equally, but I guess, and I don't think I said this at the tribal council, but I guess I was like most mad at Doug for, having Tim and Santi vote the way they did, because especially I really thought we jumbled all the final tribals, but was it the one that Dane went out? I really thought like we were going to be on the same side, and so because of all of that, I was like, it's Doug again. Like Doug is the mastermind. He was able to control and like convince and persuade his the other players to vote that way. So I was like, even though like I'm so upset because this is the reason I'm getting voted out, I was like, I have to respect that, because I don't know, I wasn't gonna be like, oh, Tim Santi, y'all just blindsided me. Like that was cool. Like Doug has been blindsiding everyone, or maybe not blindsided, but like just playing the game so well. So even though I was super pissed, I was like, I'm the most pissed at you. This doesn't make sense now that I say it out loud. But yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
I really don't think like actually tonight when I was watching y'all, I was watching it with my friend, and literally my heart rate was going off. I was like, what is happening? I was still like, I was living. She's like, yo, you're living through it. Like, take your sweet time. Even 4 years later, I still think Doug like did what he had to do. I thought he played his game. I'm getting repetitive again. Yeah.
I mean, it's not an argument about whether or not Doug. It's like the argument I'm sort of confused or curious about. It's choosing to be mad at Santi and Tim for a decision they couldn't not make, and still rewarding Doug it's hypocritical, because it's like you can reward Doug absolutely for a good game. You can do that. There's nothing against it. But to also demean Tim and Santi's game is victim blaming. It's mad at the people who didn't have a choice, and you're like, that's fucked up that you did it. It's like if you want to reward Doug, that's fine, but you cannot drag Santi and Tim for making that move, because you're acknowledging that either you have to admit one of these things. Either Doug didn't play the best game and had to rely on emotional connection to keep it that way, or Doug played the best game and Santi and Tim also played really good games. And they were forced to make this move, which doesn't invalidate their games. So I don't know if that made sense. I may have double backed. It doesn't matter. But I do have God, what the hell was my question? I was about to ask a question, and now I blacked out. Me and Doug blacking out all the time. No, I completely blanked on what it was. Oh, no, it was about, okay, so we talked about the relationships being a major part of this, and I think what we saw in the votes was the major relationships came into play on who voted who. Tim got Amanda and Dane, the people that he had the tightest alliance with. Santi got Josh, Angie, and Morgan, three people he had the closest ties to out of the three. I mean, Morgan was more of an in the air, but I think
Yeah.
Angie and Josh definitely. And then Doug got Sadie, Abby, and Delaram, who all talked to him. And I mean, Delaram didn't even talk to you, Santi, until Final 7. So, I mean, it's interesting because it really did come down to the relationships. Santi, you get the votes from Angie, Josh, Morgan. Looking back, do you feel like it all makes sense how you got those votes? Where are you feeling on that? Looking at how this season plays out, does it make more sense of why you got their votes, or is it still like, what do you think was the moment that earned you their votes?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that they got to witness. I worked with them really closely, so they knew a lot more of my pre-merge game, and so that's just an advantage when you kind of been with somebody from the start and have seen it. They already had a perception of me that maybe other people didn't have, and they might have been more aware from that. But I do think just relationships also play a factor. I think Angie and Josh really we had really great friendships, and so I don't know how much of that weighed into their decision or not. I think from what I remember Angie and Josh telling me specifically, I don't know what it was that I said during Final Tribal, but I think they were gonna vote Doug, and whatever I said convinced them otherwise. I could be wrong about that, so I have to ask them what it was that I said. But yeah, I think it was that moment that convinced them. I think the advantage with them was they got to see my game most up close and personal, and ultimately that probably made a difference from whereas everybody else didn't really get to see that the whole way through, which is on me as well.
I think, Dane, you did actually make a good point here that everyone felt bleak. I think you gave them the room enough to make a decision that wasn't Doug and not feel like they were making a personal decision doing so. Because I think, people wanted to vote for who they wanted to vote for, but they didn't want to be the victim in like, oh, you voted for Santi. Why? Because you liked him more. I thought we didn't want to vote based on who we liked more. Tim, I guess same question to you about with Amanda and Dane. First of all, are you surprised Dane voted for you? And what do you think got you their votes?
I was surprised with both. So if I remember Amanda's question correctly, it was pretty much like, I thought I was close with you, and I thought it was your number one ally, and it turns out I'm not. And I'm like, oh shit. 'Cause I felt terrible about that. Like the whole way through, like I really liked working with Amanda. So when I got that vote, I was happy, and I kind of thought that I made my argument in terms of I didn't make this last decision because Doug's my friend in terms of like a game strategy. Like I still knew, like I thought going into this final tribal, if Final Four, I won that challenge, I'm thinking I won this game. I think I won the challenge that got Doug out. And then I'm sitting there with Santi, Delaram, and me, and I thought I could pull enough votes on my arguments, which are rock solid, to have won. And it's much easier for me to win than my game, not sitting next to Doug than sitting next to Doug. With Dane's vote, when you handed me the star, no. But I think you said, if you want my vote, verbally abuse Doug, which is some questionable wording. But I thought that I did a really good job of saying why I still, because I think the perception going in was that Santi and me didn't really care, and we were just kind of throwing the game because Doug felt sad. And it really, while in essence it was similar to that, I don't think it was like as simple. So I think I did a really good job of like showing me caring. And when I got mad, I kind of thought I might have gotten your vote in like a weird Dane way.
Yeah, Tim, I knew you weren't playing lazy the whole time. And that's why I kind of wanted to give you that opportunity to speak on your own behalf. Because, yeah, I knew.
Tim, actually, to that point, Dane did say in his voting confessional, the moment when you got mad at Doug, I knew you were serious about this game. It's like, yes, literally being mad at Doug is what gave it. Also, I want to go back to the Amanda thing. What's funny about that moment is she's like, I don't think that you really wanted me. Like, you cared about your friends. Who would you want to take in an ideal world to the final three? And you didn't say her. And I was like, Tim, she's asking like in a theoretical world. And you're like, well, it would never make sense to take you. You were going home always. But I guess maybe like Delaram and Dane. It was like,
that's such a loaded question, though.
But like, it's a lie.
Well, because like week 15 or 14, I would have said, well, I guess I did say that. But players change their perception so much more than lie. But it's just bullshit at that point.
Okay, but Doug's answer was a non-answer. Doug said, he changed so much. I don't know, like...
That's the right answer, though.
No, it's a terrible answer. It's a garbage answer.
The only time that answer applies is Final Four.
Santi's answer was really good. He said, I wanted to go with Angie. I felt because it ties into his story about being loyal. You going, I don't want to take Amanda. It's like, Tim, just give her the compliment. People want to hear they're good players and that they should get these things, not,
They were better players than I was.
hey, leave that to the comments to decide.
I have been reading them. They told me.
Doug, you get votes from Delram, Sadie, and Abby, who pretty much all say they're going to do it. I guess, were you surprised that they did vote for you? And what do you think got you their votes, and what do you think lost you the other people's votes? Or do you think it wasn't so much something you did?
I think that they all saw a lot of my game the whole time. Like me, Sadie, and Delram were at least on the same tribe the whole game, and we were very close throughout. And then Abby, just through being roommates and close with them too, they were able to see everything that was going on in behind the scenes, but also in up front. So that didn't surprise me there. And then I also think that, it just came down to who people wanted to win. And I think that a lot of people didn't want me to win. And I understood that, why they didn't. And they also, Santi and Tim also played great at the end of the day. Like, it's not to take away from their game.
Of course, I'm not at all saying that they didn't play good games. I've watched all of it, so I feel very matter of fact on saying that they all played good games. I think any of you could have been deserving winners. Yes, I stand by that statement. I think any of you could have been deserving winners. It's a hot take. Look, there was a moment where I said, if Delram gets to the final three, I think she might win. And it's going to be a weird way to edit a winner. But you know what? Then Edge of Extinction came around. And it turns out you can play pretty much 3 rounds of this game and win it. That's a totally legitimate thing to do.
If I went home at 4, I think there was a good shot Delram won the game.
Yeah, I think so too. Not to downplay your game, Delram. Don't know if it's fully deserving, but if the jury feels that way, they feel that way. And I think Santi and Tim, you were both in confessional. If I were to get rid of Doug and Delram beats me, I'd hate it. What did I do this for?
Just because, Santi, we both had a long term, we were thinking about from the beginning of the game, you have your A tier, B tier, C tier, and obviously it changed at the end. Just in the terms of the game,
not the tiering. Oh, what tier is Delram in, Tim?
A plus. No, but in terms of active gameplay and the moves and that stuff.
Wow, Tim, really putting her in a low tier. That's fucked up.
Now, which clearly she ended up on an A tier, so that would be the biggest ascent. Highest in the power rankings next season.
Tim, I do have a question for you. Is there a reason that you, Doug, and Santi were so keen on making sure there were no women in the final 3?
That was cringy looking back. Just from the beginning, just me working with I worked with Amanda, but outside of that, I worked with it was you can kind of tell you have something.
But let's also make a point of this. There are many times that you specifically, and I think Doug too, you were like, we got to get rid of Angie. She's going to get all the girl votes. And same with Delram. The girls are going to vote for them. A monolith of women, they only vote together, as has been the game.
Yeah, that was cringy looking back on it.
Do you think it's because you had to deal with 2 different trios of girls? Why are you so anti-women, Tim?
I know. You heard it here first.
No, that's not actually my question. But I guess let's actually review this a little bit. Doug, if you could have made a different final 3, what would have been your ideal final 3? Let's just go from the merge on. If you could have changed it any way, who would you rather have gone with?
I think probably Santi and Delram, maybe. I don't know. It's very up in the air. I think, though, the reason also, to go off the last point, it's us, I guess me, Santi, and Tim as a trio, we were able to find the other girl, regardless of sex. There was other trios like Jam, Delram, Abby, Sadie. So who was going to be one of the? We all couldn't make it to the end. So whichever trio.
What about the other trio? Amanda, Dane, and Tim.
So I think that also was they had strong trios.
I'm a firm believer that Angie would have beaten all of us.
Yeah.
Comeback story.
That's
Yeah,
you winning the vote here.
I mean, but funny on that though, and I mentioned this during Tribal, like I was so ready for Angie to be my number one alliance throughout the entire game, like over Doug, over Tim, and I think they got a sense of that early on and didn't trust me because of it. And then we just had that huge fallout after the swap and then try to work together again. Didn't work out. And I was like, I really tried. And it was so funny because I remember, I think the night that it all like went to shambles was when I was kind of explaining who I wanted to work with. And Angie was like, oh my gosh, none of these people are people that I'm trying to work with. And that's completely fair. To be what on my end though, I had no idea. Angie never told me who she was close with. She didn't tell me she talked to Jasmine or Morgan outside of it. Like I felt like I was giving Angie everything and she still didn't trust me. And so I was just so ready to ride it all the way through. And I think if that were the case, then maybe Morgan doesn't go home after merge, and then who knows like how that shakes things up. So but yeah, I think as far as like who I would have thought, I think I would have had the highest odds of beating at the end. It might have been like me, Abby, and Dane final three. I think I would have had the best odds there.
It's so funny the you and Angie relationship because it really was the most one-sided relationship in this game. Like
it really was.
There's a lot of like one side to Doug, but those people didn't last long. You and Angie were all game, and you would give her information. And she'd be like, yeah, I guess I can work with Santi, but I don't want to go to the end. And you're like, me and Angie, we're tight. I tell her everything. And so many times, I remember we've made jokes about it. It's like, you trusted Angie so much, and she kept betraying you, but you just kept accepting it. You and Tim, you both have this issue of just being lied to and going, but it can't happen a third time.
To be fair, I told Angie I didn't trust her after that, and then like went against her. And then I thought like at that point our game started to align a bit again because she was looking for relationships, and I needed to not depend on Doug and Tim for like the end. So I was like, who can I reach out to? Somebody that I've had a previous relationship with. Maybe this can be repaired. So at least that's what was going into my mind. But like when I was watching, I was like, dang, Angie like never really trusted me, and I was so sold. I was so sold that we were working together. Oh, absolutely.
100%. I mean, look, the audience is a simp for Angie, and you were just our catalyst, or our conduit. There wasn't really a situation with Doug, I don't think, simping for anyone. I guess maybe like, Doug, you and Sadie had a very interesting relationship where like, you both knew you couldn't win against the other person, but like, you weren't going to make a move. It was so weird. Like, I remember there was a conversation with you, Sadie, and Dane is like, oh, it's going to be us working together. And like, I feel good about the three of us. And Dane would later be like, I don't know if we can trust Sadie. She's a real big threat. Like Sadie was going to be the target of a threat. And you were like, I know that she's going to want to do something against me, but maybe just a little longer. Can you explain? If this explanation is we were just really good friends, I'm cutting you off now. But can you explain a little bit about like how you managed to work with Sadie, knowing very well there was no chance in hell you would ever be able to go to the end together?
I never was fully. I always thought I would at least have a chance against her. Like I didn't think that it would have been game over if I went to the end with her. But also because we had worked so closely together and we literally told each other every single thing ever, I was like, okay, I can trust her. And she was the person that I felt like I could the most, honestly, until like pretty far into the game, until she messed up with Josh. Was like, until then I was like, she did no wrong basically. So that was something that I always held on to because it's comforting knowing like, okay, this person, like we can go the full way.
Tim, who would your ideal final three have been?
Like, again, I think we already talked about this. It's just like,
fine, okay, skipping over you, Dane. Who would your ideal final three have been?
That's a good question. Like I'm trying to look at it from because I had been with so many different people throughout the game. I think Amanda is someone I would have ideally wanted to take, and then second person. That's really difficult. Like Amanda for sure. And the problem is every time I think of a second person, I think it's very difficult and contentious at that point. Like if I picked Angie, I'm not winning that. And I know that for sure. Maybe Tim. maybe Tim. But, that was my most trusted trio. And I think at that point, there was a potential argument for me to win between the three of them. Outside of that, it's really hard to pick another person.
Well, I feel like with Angie and Amanda, who are the girls are going to vote for? It's going to be a hard decision for all those girls because they can only choose one. Delaram, who would your ideal final three have been? And if it's Sadie and Abby, I'm going to scream.
True. No, I've been thinking about it this time. I'd say Tim and Abby. Because I don't know, Abby and I played pretty similar games. And then with Tim, I don't know. I'm really thinking back. I'm like, damn, I was a very bad player. So it's hard because a lot of people did a lot more than me. And I think like my game with Abby was pretty similar, and then just with Tim, I think I could have,
God, can you imagine a world where Delaram and Abby are these Doug and Santi, and instead of it's who wins, who's the Santi in that scenario? I have to go back to this moment because it fills me with like confusion. It was from we talked to Liam and we're like, Liam, all right, you can't target Josh. Like, what are you gonna do? It's like, well, if we had been smart, I think we should have targeted like the most threatening pair of roommates in the game, Delaram and Abby. Which is like wrong answer number one. Like, how is it 4 years later and that's the answer? But Delaram, between you and Abby, who played the better game? Who was like who was the Doug in the relationship of like they are the most obvious big target threat, like they will win the game no matter what if they get to the end?
First of all, shout out to my girl Abby. I just love that girl so much. I've been texting her. But I don't know. I'd say I like relate more with Doug just because like we were both more social and we were both more connected to people. But I mean, like, I don't think it was that drastic, like Doug versus Santi. You know what I mean? So like, I don't even know what I mean. No, I pick I related more with Doug.
You heard it here first. Abby would win if it was Abby, Tim, Delaram.
I will say Delaram had the best boundaries out of anybody in this game. She would go for like being called idiots for like 20 minutes, and it's like, so guys, like, want to go get ice cream? Just separation.
One of my favorite editing things of this season was that there are so many, more than anyone else, clips of Delaram in strategy meetings eating, like whether it's mac and cheese or a bagel or just not, most of the time not in the diner. She is just somewhere with food eating. Like, it's Delaram, was your tightest alliance with food this whole time?
Honestly, I needed comfort food during that season. No, but I also kept being like, oh my god, every shot. I think actually at Final Travel Council, I was still eating. I was like, what? And when I was talking with my friend, she was like, girl, you were just so busy that whole time, like your confessionals and tribals and all that was your time to decompress. So I think that looking back on it, I'm like, girl, you should have fed yourself. You should have fueled up for roasting these guys.
All right. We've been doing this for an hour and a half. I want to let you guys go to bed or whatever. I don't know. I'm on the West Coast with Santi. Whoa.
Hey.
So I guess my question is, looking back, if you could change one thing about your season, about you, how you played this season, what would it be? And also, like, how did you feel about watching it all? What was the experience like? We'll start with Dane, of course.
Oh, part of me really wants to say I would have changed how I presented myself for the season. Like, obviously, it could be so easy to say, like, oh, I just wish I'd played better. I just wish I'd voted differently here. The season was not the easiest to watch because, like, I'm not the kind of person who ever enjoys putting people down, and having that, like, opportunity for the first time in my life to do it in Survivor and a game where it's like, yeah, you can separate the player from the game, but you're going to get backlash for that. And it was kind of hard for me to watch the whole thing. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, I think that's the number one thing I would change. I don't necessarily think I would change who I was voting for. Sorry, everyone who wants me to go back and take back Eric. But yeah, that's the number one thing I would change, is that I'd just try to be nicer, even if it were like boring for TV. yeah, that's it.
Delaram, what about you?
I wish I was less of a sheep during the game. I just let my tightest alliances carry me. Watching back, I was like, dang, you're so boring. People wanted to root for me, and I give them all the credit. Like, I didn't do much for most of it. Yeah, it's pretty cringe. I also wish I was a little bit more competitive in the challenges. I'm just looking at myself in the last one, especially, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, okay, and I saw one of these comments. I forget who it was, but like, Bolo, not my thing, These were very like tailgate-esque like stuff, and that's just not my thing. But like, I don't know, if I was a little bit more competitive, if I, had a little bit more urgency to win immunities, I think that would have helped a lot. But yeah, mostly just like making bigger moves in the beginning and just being, cracking out Michelle earlier. And the last thing I want to say is like, just as a person, I think this season of Survivor really changed me because I was just always like, don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, like, yay. And I still like don't want to, but if people are going to walk all over me, like, I'm gonna say how it is. So, you know what? Thank you for making me feel comfortable with just going at it. Yeah.
Now you hurt people's feelings all the time. They don't even ask for anything. You walk in and just shout at them, going, "Idiot! Idiot!" Tim, what about you?
I think my big thing's like, as a fan, obviously I would have like wanted to have agency, like Aaron always said, with the moves that I could have made. But as a person, I mean, things that would have changed my game would literally just be have a better argument for the final tribal council. Like formulate. Maybe I'm just being stupid. I think I still could have like, if I presented my argument better, I think I still have a better story than Santi does. So I think just in terms of that final tribal council, just speaking more fluently, becoming more prepared, and keeping more level-headed. But in terms of looking back on the game, I mean, the reason I couldn't sleep, and I was like, I loved it, man. And just like, thank you to Jack and Austin, all the editors and the creators and like the fans.
Excuse me, I'm really the only editor. They don't need to
They mentioned that they edited.
Jack did 2 episodes of Confessionals, barely, okay? Thank me.
I have been, dude. I mean, you've been like, and the fans have said it too. Like, we didn't always give you the best gameplay to roll with, and the editing and the production was always like top notch. And it's just like, well, yeah. When I first looked back, I was like, I get to like see myself how I was 4 years ago, and that's always going to be there. It's really cool, and it also shows your insecurities and your flaws way more than it shows your skills and stuff, which is awesome to look at. But yeah.
Doug. Well, this is an important question before we get to that. What's the dog's name?
Doug.
His name's Arlo.
We love it. This is also a good comment. Where is it? Oh no, here it is. Again, there's comments are everywhere on this one. Doug, what about you?
Definitely, obviously, like looking back, it would be to like have separated the game from just life in general more. But that's not even. My biggest regret is going to be not playing an idol at Final 6 in terms of just gameplay, and then obviously just not texting Sadie about that. Those are the 2 big ones. I literally can still, if I really get into it, I can feel that same feeling when I saw my votes read and looking at Tim in the eyes and threatening him if he were to have flipped. Yeah, so if I could have avoided that situation as a whole, it would have been a lot better. However, it did make for some good TV, so I guess you guys are welcome.
Sandy, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I already said the number one answer, which is like boundaries. But as far as like game, I think it would have been doing more homework before the game. What gave Doug such a big advantage, I think, over me especially, was he was like a Survivor super fan, whereas like I got introduced to the game by this game. I think I watched 1 season of like Guts and Glory, so most of my game was like instinct and figuring like just whatever savvy, like getting away with like smooth talking and whatever. And like having a read on people, but just with a little bit more of like understanding Survivor and pacing, like just little things that you get from like watching the show, it makes a big difference strategy wise. So that's one of the things I wish I had done before that I feel like could have changed something.
Before we go, there's also something, now that you finally won, I can reveal this moment. earlier in the summer we had the Generations at Core game. I think it was at like Final 7. There was a room with you, Steve, Katie, and Chris Thomas, and I was like, all 4 winners, baby, still here. What's happening? Obviously, it's been such a pleasure to have all of you in this season. Obviously, there are things we all wish we could change or things that didn't happen, whatever. This is hard. I think I remember talking to Doug, you, Tim, and Santi all about like how hard it was going to be to watch this, especially the finale, because like I'm not trying to downplay it, or I made comments, but like I recognize this was not an easy decision for anyone, and no one can really be blamed for what they had to do. Like, this is for $100. This game isn't $1 million. Like, you cannot be expected to like ruin friendships, and it's a hard decision for everyone. So I think that you all did exactly what you were going to do, and I think it was Tim who said it. If people are in your position and they think about it fairly, they are going to do the same thing. They will always do it, and that's fair. That's what the game is about, and it happens. Did your season influence how I wanted to run season 8? Absolutely, 100%. There's not a second that I didn't think about. You know what we need to do? Make this more competitive. Let's name the next season winner take all. But yeah, this has been an absolute pleasure to do, and I'm so happy to be able to edit it, put it together, and give you some of your insecurities, but also maybe something to like look back on and see growth. Because I think you're not the people you were 4 years ago, and Doug, you'll get to see yourself again in the next season, whenever that is.
Can't wait.
I know, you're so excited. Doug really went, I'm going to put myself into more emotional turmoil. But again, thank you everyone who's been watching. We really appreciate it. Final 5, thank you so much for coming. Tomorrow we will be having a live show with Aaron, Austin, the Generation 1 host, and a couple other of our most favorite people from some of the live shows this season, talking about the finale and how we feel about it. If any of you want to watch it, you're welcome to. They're likely to be a lot more critical with you not being there, but that is, of course, what will happen. But it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, everyone who's been watching. I know this is now like almost 4 hours of content in the night. And we're going to bring you more. Season 8 coming out next week. I'm joking. That's not happening. But thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern. Well, I will, not any of these. Good night. And I'm ending it.